Hello guys, Joe with Bitraged. So we got a couple questions that I wanted to answer here in this video. One of them was, why did Bitcoin stop here at 6,400? And the other one was, how do I learn how to trade? How do I learn these techniques, learn these patterns, learn structure in the market, learn how to identify it? How do I learn that? And I want to answer both of those questions here in this video. So we're looking here at a daily chart for Bitcoin, and when we were doing videos a couple months ago, we didn't have as much data to look at for trend lines, and so we drew a trend line more like this, right? So at the time, this was accurate. At the time, this was relevant and made sense. But then when we have more data to look at, this doesn't make as much sense. So we can move it and make a little bit more sense out of it. Okay, so that makes a little more sense now, right? You have three solid anchor points for this trend line for a channel. Coming down here, we have a channel here as well. We have the bottom of this channel, at least short term. And we can draw this a couple different ways, and it really depends on what happens here in the next few days, in the next week, as we interact with this trend line to really determine the exact placement of it. But this is a pretty decent channel that we're working with right now. So to answer the question, why did Bitcoin stop at 6,400? The answer to that question is in structure. So if we draw out a structure here, you can see we're working on a channel here as well. So we have a long-term channel and we have a shorter-term channel here. So there are, again, a couple different ways you could draw this, but the data we have right now, this looks pretty reasonable, right? So what about what's going on in the middle of this channel here? How do we determine why that's happening and what might happen should it continue in the same direction? So we can draw another structure here to really determine what might happen. All right, so we got a pretty good resistance line here that we're following at this point. And then for the bottom here, we don't have as much data to work on, but we do have a few points here that we can determine where we might be headed. So this is a descending triangle, and if this plays out and we actually follow this, if we ride down this line here or fall back off, come back and forth a little bit, when price gets compacted into a box like this, so let's say we did something like this, when price gets compressed like this, you're going to see it get repelled because it can't stay compressed like that for very long. So how do we know which direction this might turn? How do we know if this is going to turn down or make a run if this does play out? So how do you determine this is you have to understand the pattern. You have to understand what a descending triangle means and the statistical probability of it doing one of two things, either breaking out or breaking through. And to determine that, you have to understand how this works. So I want to give you a resource so that you can research these patterns. You can look at what has happened in other charts and apply these patterns to this chart so you can see the structure in these charts, so you can see it make sense. And that resource is called FinVids. So finvids.com, and I'll leave a link in the description. It's a really good website because it has every candlestick pattern you could want to research. This guy's got a ton of chart patterns and structure that you can look at. So for example, we're looking at triangles, right? So he's got a video here, and they're very dry videos as far as enthusiasm, but as far as information goes, it's really strong information, and it's backed up by sources. He's got sources down here, so it's not just some guy spewing garbage. It's actually sourced. He's got actual chart patterns from real charts, Chevron, AT&T, and he gives you examples of what could happen if the chart does this or that. So we're looking at a descending triangle, right? So he's got an example here of a descending triangle, and in this example, price broke below and it broke through. But in this example here, we broke out above. Now, with a pattern like this, there are probabilities of what could happen. So he's got some probabilities here. A descending triangle breaks out to the downside 64% of the time according to this study, and it breaks out above 36% of the time. So it gives you a likelihood of one of two things happening. Now you can trade this by buying the breakout or selling the breakthrough. So for example, if this does play out and we run down into this channel here and price gets compressed, you would just wait for one of two things to happen. You'd wait for us to either break out, close above, or break through, and that will give you an indication of where the price is going to be headed, at least short term. So if we broke out, well, then you have a pretty high likelihood of us coming back to support, to resistance here at this trend line. But you do have to be aware that sometimes in cryptocurrency and really any market, price can get going really quickly and get bought up really quickly, that you'll break out of a channel, come back through, reintegrate into that channel, and continue the trend. So don't get caught in false breakouts. One last example I'll show you here of chart structure, market structure, is on the Litecoin chart because it's really, really clear. If you look at this chart here, maybe you don't see a whole lot of indication of anything going on. You don't really see a way to tell where price might be headed in the future. But if I turn on this channel here I drew, now that makes a whole lot more sense, right? Now you can see why this ran down in a specific pattern. Now you can see why this structure happened. And now you have a point to watch if you're trading this. These trend lines here act as support and resistance. So that's pretty much all I have for you today. I did want to answer both of those questions and then give you that resource so that when you see these structures happen in the chart, you can go research what they mean and get a good idea of where the market's headed, get a good idea of what's even going on in the market. So I hope that helps you. If you have a question, you have a comment, leave those in the comments, and we'll get to as many as we can. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care.